I still remember the first time I stepped into my future mother-in-law's house. It was the kind of place that looked like a showroom. Pristine white walls, velvet curtains, art that felt more like a price tag than personal expression. Everything about the place screamed wealth, control, and image. But the coldest part of that house wasn't the marble floor or the steel gray chandelier. It was her, Lorraine. She greeted me with a handshake instead of a hug. Not out of rudeness, at least not directly, but the kind of politeness that carries poison beneath the surface. Her lips formed a smile, but her eyes scanned me like I was a questionable item at an airport checkpoint. Her gaze lingered on my worn jeans, the scuff on my boot, the small chip in my phone case I hadn't had time to replace. Then she said it. "Nice to meet you." I wasn't expecting someone so casual. Daniel laughed awkwardly and kissed my cheek, trying to break the tension. I smiled, choosing silence. I had met women like Lorraine before. Women who confuse elegance with superiority, who build thrones out of insecurity and sit on them looking down at everyone else. But what she didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was that I had enough money in my name to buy that throne, the crown, and the kingdom that came with it. I just didn't want it. I had spent most of my life watching people lose themselves to wealth. My parents, before they died, built a logistics company from the ground up, starting with one truck and ending with an empire. I inherited that empire at 22. I managed it quietly for 3 years and then handed day-to-day control to my lawyer and longtime family friend. I moved cities, legally shortened my name, and started working with women in low-income neighborhoods. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because it gave my life meaning in a way money never did. When I met Daniel at a community fundraiser, I was the one serving drinks in a borrowed sweater. He was handsome, gentle, and strangely unbothered by appearances. He made me laugh, made me feel safe. He didn't know who I was, and I loved that. I didn't tell him about my inheritance. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to be seen for the woman I had chosen to become, not the number behind my name. But Lorraine? She saw nothing in me. Or worse, she saw exactly what she wanted to see. A gold digger. A girl from nowhere who had latched on to her precious, successful son. I could almost hear the narrative forming in her mind. The pauses in her speech, the way she looked at me sideways every time I spoke. She didn't need to say the words. They were carved into every nod, every backhanded compliment, every forced laugh when I shared something. We sat for dinner. She had hired a private chef, of course. The meal was an art piece. Foam, dots of sauces, and a portion so small it looked like a joke. I tried to thank her politely, but she waved me off. "It's nothing. We eat like this all the time." She asked me where I was from. I told her vaguely. She asked what I did. I said I worked in education and women's advocacy. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that like a job, or more of a passion project?" I looked her straight in the eye. "It's both. I fund it myself." Daniel smiled proudly. "She's being modest. She helps a lot of people." But Lorraine wasn't listening. She had tuned me out the moment she decided I wasn't worthy. The rest of the night passed in a fog of passive-aggressive jabs and tense silences. Daniel didn't notice, or pretended not to. I could tell he wanted us to get along. I didn't want to disappoint him. So I smiled, I laughed, I helped clean the dishes. And when she handed me the sponge with a smirk and said, "Well, I suppose this is more your element," I took it without a word. I wasn't here to win her approval. I was here for Daniel. But that night, as I stood alone in the guest bathroom staring at my reflection in her gold-rimmed mirror, I made a quiet promise to myself. Let her underestimate me. Let her think I'm small, desperate, greedy. Let her laugh behind my back and whisper to her friends about the poor little girl who thought she could marry up. Because one day, she'll find out who I really am. And she won't be laughing anymore. People say wealth changes you. They're wrong. It's not wealth that changes you. It's how people treat you because of it. After my parents passed in a car accident when I was 22, I became the sole heir of Delgado Logistics, a transportation empire valued at over $70 million at the time. In a matter of weeks, I went from a university student to CEO of a multinational company. Everyone around me suddenly changed. Professors gave me special treatment. Friends asked for loans with no intention of returning them. Strangers smiled too wide and leaned in too close. Everyone wanted something, except me. I wanted peace. In the 2 years that followed, I learned everything I could: business, finance, international trade, HR. But every meeting, every handshake, every networking gala made me feel like I was disappearing. I wasn't Sophia anymore. I was the Delgado girl, the money girl, the opportunity, the ticket. So I did something no one expected. I stepped back. Officially, I became inactive. I handed daily operations to my father's most trusted advisor and moved away from São Paulo to a much smaller town. I dropped my last name, changed legal documents to just Sofia Lima, and used an alias when making investments. Some called it a breakdown. It wasn't. It was a beginning. I rented a modest apartment, furnished with second-hand couches and a table I built myself from recycled wood. I worked at a community center that helped women get out of abusive relationships. I used my money to pay rent for families facing eviction, fund scholarships, and purchase supplies for small schools. Always anonymously. I never wanted a thank you. I just wanted to feel something real again. When I met Daniel, he didn't know any of this. He walked into the community center on a rainy Thursday afternoon, trying to volunteer. I was the one training new staff. He was charming but shy, a bit awkward but genuine. He listened when I spoke. He asked questions no one else bothered to ask. He helped clean after everyone had left. I liked him immediately. He thought I was humble, just a regular girl trying to make a difference. And I let him believe it. At first, I hesitated. Should I tell him who I really was? But then I remembered how people reacted to that version of me. The guarded glances, the fake enthusiasm, the false friendships. I didn't want that with him, so I kept it quiet. Not to deceive, but to protect. Protect something real, something rare. After 6 months, we were in love. After 1 year, we were engaged. And after 18 months, I met Lorraine. That's when the storm began. She never asked about my past, never wanted to know my story. She had already made her mind up about me. Poor, needy, a social climber. Every time I spoke, she smiled that sharp, cruel smile. I could see her mentally checking boxes. No pedigree, no elegance, no visible career, definitely a gold digger. The irony was almost funny. I had met women like Lorraine my whole life. Wives of old money businessmen who never worked a day but judged every other woman who didn't walk, talk, or dress like them. Women whose entire existence was built on marrying well. And yet, they called other women gold diggers. She knew nothing about me, but she acted like she knew everything. One afternoon, Daniel told me something that stayed with me. "My mom thinks you're too simple," he said, avoiding eye contact. I smiled. "She's not wrong," I replied. "I am simple, by choice." He looked confused. "I could have had a penthouse," I said, "but I chose a 1-bedroom apartment with plants and a dog. I could wear luxury brands, but I prefer linen and sneakers. I could be sitting on a boardroom chair right now, but I'd rather sit on a classroom floor reading to kids." He laughed softly. "I love that about you." I believed him. I still do. But Lorraine didn't love it. She hated it. She thought I wasn't enough, that I couldn't provide, couldn't elevate, couldn't match her son. But what she failed to see was that I had already elevated him, not in status, in soul. She thought I was hiding from shame, but I was hiding from her world, the world that measures a woman's worth by her heels and handbags. She thought she could push me out by treating me like I didn't belong. But the truth was, I never wanted to belong to her world in the first place. I just wanted to build something better. But now, she was threatening my peace, my love, and the life I had carefully rebuilt with Daniel. And I knew that if I stayed silent, she would never stop. So I began preparing, not to fight, to reveal. Because when you've been underestimated your whole life, sometimes the greatest power is the truth you've been holding back. By the 3rd month of our engagement, Lorraine had declared a silent war against me. She never raised her voice. She never cursed. But her weapon of choice was always precision. A carefully timed insult, a public comparison, a reminder that I didn't belong in her world, the world she had curated for her son. The strange part was, Daniel didn't seem to notice. He kept saying things like, "She just needs time," or You're misreading her tone. But I wasn't. I wasn't just reading it. I was feeling it. In every room, in every family gathering, in every backhanded compliment she aimed like an arrow. She's earthy, she told her sister once, loud enough for me to hear. But Daniel always liked charity work. It makes him feel like a hero. At dinner, she made a point to introduce me as Sophia, Daniel's fiancée. She's doing some work with, underprivileged communities. Isn't that sweet? One afternoon, she sent me a gift, a book titled How to Be a Lady. I opened it, stared at the gilded cover, then calmly placed it in the trash. Later, I found out she had asked Daniel if I'd read it. He laughed, assuming it was a joke. I didn't laugh, but it was her next move that changed everything. It started with a name, Amanda. At a dinner she hosted, a formal cold affair where every place setting had calligraphy and the wine cost more than my rent, she brought in a surprise guest. "This is Amanda," she said, gesturing to a tall, statuesque woman with perfect curls and a surgically bright smile. She and Daniel dated in college. She just moved back to town. Amanda sat beside Daniel, laughing just a little too loud at his stories, touching his arm, sharing inside jokes. I sat across from them, invisible. At one point, Lorraine turned to me and asked, "Did you say you went to public university?" I nodded. "Oh," she said, looking at Amanda. "Amanda went to Brown." I excused myself before dessert. Daniel followed me outside. "What's wrong?" "What do you mean, what's wrong?" I said, trying not to let the hurt leak into my voice. "Your mother just brought your ex to a family dinner, and you didn't even blink," he sighed. "I didn't know she'd be there." "That's the problem, Daniel," I said. "You never know, because you never want to see it." He looked down. "She's just opinionated." "No, she's manipulative, and if you don't draw a line, she's going to ruin this." He hugged me, promised to talk to her, but I knew he wouldn't. Not really. Because people like Daniel, good-hearted, non-confrontational people, always hope problems disappear if they pretend they don't exist. But I wasn't like him. I didn't run from problems. I studied them. I watched. I planned. The next time Lorraine invited us for lunch, I accepted. I even dressed up. A cream blouse, tailored slacks, gold earrings I hadn't worn in years. I brought flowers. I smiled. I watched her relax, thinking she had won. But I noticed the wine glasses were set for 4. I asked who else was joining. "Oh, just a friend," she said. "You'll love her. Amanda." Again. This time she hugged Daniel at the door. "This is so unexpected," I said, calmly sipping my drink. Amanda smiled. I was just in the neighborhood. And Lorraine? She was glowing, like a queen watching 2 pawns collide. After lunch, Amanda conveniently stayed behind. I excused myself and left early. Daniel apologized again. "I'll talk to her." "No," I said. "I will." The next day, I asked Lorraine to meet me for tea. We sat outside, beneath an umbrella. I wore a simple black dress and no makeup. She arrived in designer sunglasses and pearls. "I wanted to ask you something," I said. She nodded. "Do you really think I'm not good enough for Daniel?" She gave me that smile again, the one with the knife hidden inside. "I think Daniel deserves someone who elevates him," she said carefully. "Not someone who brings him down." I nodded. "I see. And to be perfectly honest," she continued, "your background is unclear. We don't know where you came from, who your family is, or what kind of future you can provide." "Interesting," I said, placing my napkin on the table. "Because I always believed character was more important than background." She tilted her head. "That's what people with no background say." I stood up. "That's the last insult I'll accept from you, Lorraine." She laughed. "Or what? You'll write an angry blog post?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'll just stop pretending." She blinked. "Pretending what?" But I didn't answer. I left her with her tea, her pearls, and her poisoned pride. That day, I made a phone call. To my lawyer. "I need you to pull together everything," I said. "The portfolio, the awards, the press articles, the charity impact, all of it." "And release it?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But soon." Because Lorraine was building her illusion higher and higher, and she was about to fall harder than she ever imagined. The final straw didn't come with screaming or slammed doors. It came with a party invitation. 2 weeks after that meeting over tea, the one where Lorraine made it clear she believed I was beneath her son, Daniel received an invitation to his mother's annual spring charity gala. Normally, I would have stayed home. I had no interest in designer cocktails and conversations about private schools and third homes in Tuscany, but something told me I needed to go. "She wants us both there," Daniel said, reading the invitation. "I think she's trying to extend an olive branch." I raised an eyebrow. "Lorraine doesn't give olive branches. She throws them like darts." He laughed. "Just come." For me? So I did. I dressed simply. A navy silk dress I'd worn 3 times before, and a pair of vintage heels I'd bought at a thrift store. I didn't walk into that gala hoping to impress. I walked in knowing who I was. The venue was extravagant. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, a champagne wall. I recognized half the people there from headlines: CEOs, politicians, media figures. I could tell Lorraine was watching me from the moment I arrived, judging every thread of fabric I wore, every movement I made. She greeted us with a kiss on the cheek, her smile too tight, too rehearsed. "Darling, you look quaint," she said. "I admire your confidence in repeating outfits. Very eco-conscious." I smiled. "Thank you, Lorraine. And I admire your ability to insult and compliment at the same time. Very efficient." Daniel coughed into his drink to hide a laugh, but Lorraine wasn't amused. We were seated at the front table, directly across from Amanda. Of course. Amanda looked radiant, as always, in a dress that likely cost more than my car. Lorraine spent half the dinner steering conversations toward Amanda's boutique business, her incredible family background, and the potential of marrying into the right kind of lineage. Amanda blushed modestly. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. When I came back, I overheard them talking. "Lorraine, I don't think this engagement will last. Daniel just hasn't realized it yet. Amanda, she doesn't fit. You can feel it. Lorraine, I'll give it a few more weeks. Then we'll help him see clearly." I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I simply returned to the table, picked up my clutch, and whispered to Daniel, "We're leaving." In the car, I told him everything. Every word. He was silent for a moment. Then, "She's crossed the line." "No," I said. "She's erased the line." He shook his head. "I should have said something sooner." I nodded. "Yes, you should have. But now I will." That night, I opened my safe. Inside were documents I hadn't touched in years: press clippings, business records, articles naming me one of the most influential under-30 entrepreneurs in Brazil, donations, awards, investments, proof of who I really was, not the version Lorraine invented, the real me. And that's when I had the idea. I wasn't going to fight Lorraine in private anymore. I was going to expose the truth, not for revenge, but because staying silent was letting her win. The opportunity came faster than expected. Daniel's birthday was the following weekend. He didn't want anything big, but Lorraine insisted. "Just a small garden party," she promised. I knew better. By the time we arrived at her estate, there were at least 60 people. Caterers, string quartet, custom cocktails named after family traditions, and of course, Amanda. I leaned over to Daniel. "Did you know she'd be here?" He clenched his jaw. "No, I swear." Lorraine approached with a glass of rosé and handed it to me with that signature smile. "Try this. Imported from Provence. You might not have had it before." I took the glass. "Actually, I own the vineyard that produces it." She laughed. "You always have a joke ready, don't you?" I just smiled. After dinner, she gathered everyone for a toast. "To Daniel," she said, raising her glass. "A man of class, intelligence, and deep potential. May he always be surrounded by people who help him rise." The implication wasn't subtle. I waited. Then I stood. "May I add something?" She tried to hide her annoyance. "Of course, dear." I took the mic. "Daniel is everything you said, and more. But what makes him special isn't just what he does. It's who he chooses to love, even when the world tells him not to." People murmured. Eyes turned to me. "And just so there's no more confusion," I continued, "I'm not here because I need saving, or because I'm after anything. I've walked away from more money than most of you will see in a lifetime, and built more than you'll ever guess." I nodded to the staff. The projector flickered to life, and for the first time they saw me, all of me. Photos from Forbes, footage of business conferences, newspaper headlines. Youngest female CEO shocks industry with record growth. Anonymous donor funds, education for 2,000 girls in rural areas. Delgado Logistics, the woman behind the empire. Gasps. Whispers. Lorraine stood frozen. Amanda dropped her glass. Daniel stared at the screen, then turned to me. "You're Delgado?" "I was," I said. "Now I'm just Sophia, and I was hoping that would be enough." Lorraine's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I handed the mic back. Then I sat down. For the first time that night, the room was quiet, and I was no longer the one being judged. For a few seconds after the video ended, the silence was suffocating. You could hear the wine glasses sweating on the tablecloth. Someone's fork clattered. A child whispered, "Mom, is that her?" as his mother gently shushed him. Lorraine stood at the front of the garden like a woman who had just watched her castle burn to the ground, only to realize she'd been the one lighting the matches all along. Her perfect posture wilted just a bit. Her fingers tightened around her glass of rosé, but she didn't sip. She didn't speak. And neither did I. I didn't need to. That was the beauty of truth. Once you release it, it echoes louder than any insult ever could. Daniel sat next to me, his hand frozen mid-reach for mine. I could feel the questions buzzing in his mind, thick and fast. But he didn't ask them. Not here. Not yet. Lorraine tried to compose herself. She raised her chin, like a pageant queen who'd just tripped in front of the judges. She forced a smile. "Well," she said, voice brittle, "what an unexpected surprise." People weren't looking at her the same anymore. The guests who had politely laughed at her jabs now glanced at her like they'd just discovered something rotten beneath gold wrapping. You could see them connecting the dots, remembering the insults she'd hurled at me, the way she'd paraded Amanda around, the subtle humiliations. One woman, I think she was the wife of a politician, leaned toward her husband and whispered, "She treated her like trash." "And she was a millionaire the whole time?" Daniel stood. "I think that's enough for tonight." His voice was calm, but final, the kind of voice people listen to. The party ended quickly after that. The quartet packed up. Guests gave short goodbyes. Some even apologized to me, though they'd never said a cruel word. Guilt by association. Amanda slipped away without saying a word. And Lorraine? She lingered by the French doors, as if hoping I'd walk over and say something to save her dignity. I didn't. Daniel and I left in silence. Back home, I sat on the couch. He sat across from me. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. "I needed to know," I said. "If you'd love me without it. If you saw me, not the money, not the name, just me." "And I did," he said. "I do. But my mother isn't the problem anymore," I finished. He nodded slowly. "I should have protected you from her." "Yes," I said. "You should have." There was no anger in my voice, just truth, and he accepted it. The next morning, the story exploded. Someone had filmed the toast, the video reveal, the guests' reactions. It was already trending under the hashtag #WhyGoldDiggerNoMore. News outlets picked it up. Social media users praised the quiet millionaire who had let the insults build until justice wrote itself. They called me elegant, graceful, powerful. None of the things Lorraine ever allowed herself to believe about me. Her fall was silent, but thorough. Her charity board asked her to step down for optics. Friends stopped calling. A podcast she used to appear on quietly removed her episodes. The whispers started to reach her. She called her a gold digger, and the girl paid for her medical bills behind her back. She said she had no class. Turns out the foundation she brags about was funded by her. Maybe the one with no class was her all along. 3 days later, she showed up at our house. I was watering the lavender on our front porch. She stood at the gate in designer sunglasses and a white silk scarf tied tightly beneath her chin, like she was shielding herself from a wind that had long since passed. "Sophia," she said. I didn't move. I came to apologize. I nodded once. "Then say it." She stepped forward. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I know. I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," I said. "You never asked. You didn't care." She looked down. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you, Lorraine. I pity you. You had a chance to gain a daughter, And you chose a fantasy. She blinked rapidly. People are turning on me. I lost everything. No, I said quietly. You lost access to what you thought made you powerful. The rest? That was never yours to begin with. She stared at me, speechless. I'm not angry, I said. But you won't be part of our lives anymore. Daniel deserves peace. I do too. Please, she whispered. Don't take him from me. I'm not, I said. You did that yourself. She left without another word. That night, Daniel took my hand as we watched the stars from our window. She's gone, he said. Yes, I whispered. But I'm still here. He looked at me, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. I don't deserve you, he said. I don't want someone who deserves me, I replied. I want someone who grows with me. He nodded, eyes misting. Then let's grow. And in that moment, I knew. Her voice was no longer in our home. Her shadow no longer lingered in our peace. Her fall wasn't public because I made it so. It was public because truth always finds its way out. And when it does, silence becomes the loudest justice of all. Most people assume I kept my identity a secret because I was ashamed of it, that I didn't want to be associated with wealth, with privilege, with the empire my parents built. But shame had nothing to do with it. I hid my name because I wanted to know, for once in my life, who would love me when I had nothing to offer. When my parents died, I became Sofia Delgado overnight. Heiress, CEO, a living headline. I had reporters outside my apartment before I even had time to grieve. Financial advisors slid business cards under my door. Family friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages like, "If you need anything, I'm here," especially if it involves managing your assets. I was 22, alone, heartbroken, and suddenly rich. The board of directors wanted me to sit at the head of the table. I sat there, not because I felt ready, but because I didn't know how to say no. I signed contracts I didn't understand, posed for photos I didn't want to be in. The worst part? People stopped looking me in the eye. They looked at my last name, at what they could take, at what I represented. That's when I began to disappear, slowly, quietly. One night, after a particularly grueling press conference, I went home and took off my heels, my makeup, my identity. I looked in the mirror and said aloud, "I want my life back." But you can't take back a name like Delgado. It lives on your credit cards, your passport, your public records. So I buried it. Not illegally, just intentionally. I filed to use my middle name, Lima, and relocated to a town where no one had ever heard of my parents, their empire, or the logistics business that kept the country running. I started working in nonprofit education. At first, just organizing supplies, then tutoring. Eventually, I created a mobile literacy unit that brought books to rural schools. I funded it quietly, through shell companies, never putting my name on anything. And for the first time in years, I felt free. No one cared where I came from. They only cared if I showed up, if I listened, if I helped. That's where I met Daniel. I didn't plan on falling in love. Honestly, I was afraid of it. I didn't trust easily anymore. But he was different. He wasn't flashy or arrogant or chasing some perfect image of success. He read poetry. He volunteered weekends. He remembered the names of the kids at the center. And he looked at me, not my clothes or my resume or my bank account, but me. So I didn't tell him the truth. At first, it was self-preservation, but then it became something deeper. I needed to know what love felt like when there was no name, no empire, no safety net. When I was just Sophia, no fortune, no legacy, just me. And it worked, until Lorraine. She reminded me of everything I had escaped, every smug smile, every carefully worded insult. Every moment she tried to reduce me to nothing more than a social climbing outsider. It chipped away at the peace I had built. She didn't just attack my character. She attacked the life I had chosen. The simplicity, the humility, the purpose. She saw it as weakness. But I knew better. Because it takes strength to walk away from luxury when it's suffocating you. It takes courage to choose quiet purpose over loud prestige. And it takes everything to remain kind when the world insists on being cruel. Still, hiding had a cost. Daniel deserved honesty. And even though I told myself I was protecting our love, I knew deep down I had been protecting myself too. from judgment, from being used, from becoming a symbol again instead of a woman. The night after the party, after the truth had exploded into the world, I sat alone in our kitchen while Daniel slept upstairs. I stared at the same press clippings I had once hidden away in a box. My face on magazine covers. The headlines, "The Delgado legacy lives on. Sofia Delgado, Brazil's quiet billionaire." And I asked myself, did I betray myself by walking away? The answer came gently, like a whisper. No, you saved yourself. But in saving myself, I had built a wall between me and the man I loved. And now that wall had crumbled. The question was, would what we had survive in the sunlight? The next morning, Daniel came downstairs. He was quiet at first, thoughtful. He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. "I Googled you last night," he said with a soft smile. "Yeah?" I replied. He nodded. "You were incredible. You still are." I looked at him, bracing. "I was afraid this would change things," I admitted. "It does change things," he said. "Now I see how much you've sacrificed, how much you've carried, and how much I didn't know. Does it scare you?" "No," he said. "It humbles me." And just like that, the wall between us disappeared. He didn't love me despite the truth. He loved me with it. And for the first time in years, I loved myself fully. Not just as the woman who walked away from power, but as the woman who could now claim it again, on her own terms. There are invitations you throw away without thinking, and then there are the ones that demand an answer. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, sealed in gold wax. My name, Sophia Lima, was written in precise, familiar calligraphy, Lorraine's handwriting. Inside, a card. "You are cordially invited to the Lorraine Bennett Women's Society Annual Gala, Rebuilding Grace, the Power of Redemption." At the bottom, in smaller script, "Attendance strongly encouraged." I almost laughed. Lorraine, the woman who had tried to erase me from her family's life, now wanted me to stand beside her, on a night themed around redemption. Daniel found me standing by the window, the card still in my hand. "She really sent that?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "She wants to fix her image," I said flatly. "Not our relationship." He nodded. "You don't have to go." But I did. Not for her, for me. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It wasn't about revenge or even respect. It was about closure and claiming my place, publicly, without apology or fear. I called my tailor. Not for something flashy. I didn't want sequins or plunging necklines. I wanted strength, elegance, dignity, control. The dress arrived the night before the gala, deep emerald green silk, tailored to the shape of a woman who no longer needed to shrink. I arrived at the venue alone. Daniel would join me later, but I wanted to walk in on my own terms. No arm to lean on, no shield. The room was crowded, women in floor-length gowns, men in tuxedos, conversations floating in curated tones. Lorraine was at the center, as always, surrounded by admirers. She saw me. Her smile faltered, then quickly returned. "Sophia," she said, stepping forward with a practiced air. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't miss it." She lowered her voice. "Tonight is important. There are people I need to impress." There it was, the truth under the performance. She didn't want me here as a guest. She wanted me as a symbol. The woman she once tore down, now standing beside her, pretending everything was fine. "Let's just enjoy the night," she added quickly, before I could reply. "And keep the past in the past." She turned and floated back to her circle, leaving me standing near the bar. But the past doesn't stay buried just because it's inconvenient. An hour in, the speeches began. Lorraine took the stage, wearing silver-like armor. "This year," she said into the microphone, "our gala celebrates the power of second chances, the beauty of rebuilding relationships and reputations." She paused dramatically. "And in that spirit, I'd like to honor a woman who embodies grace, humility, and forgiveness." I knew what was coming. "Sophia," she said, "will you please join me on stage?" The room turned. Spotlights followed. I could have declined, but I didn't. I walked up the stairs slowly, heels silent against the polished wood. She handed me a small glass trophy. "A symbol of reconciliation," she said into the mic. I took it, held it for a moment. Then I leaned into the mic. "Thank you, Lorraine," I said, voice calm, steady. "This is unexpected." Polite chuckles. "But I want to be honest with this room, because I believe that redemption starts with truth." Silence. "I was once invited into this family as a stranger, and instead of kindness, I was met with judgment. I was labeled a gold digger, an outsider, an embarrassment." Gasps. Lorraine's smile froze. "What most people didn't know," I continued, "was that I came from more than enough. I just chose to live less loudly." The crowd shifted. Murmurs began. My wealth was never the secret. My silence was, because I believed if I said nothing, I could earn respect the honest way. I turned slightly to Lorraine. "But silence allows abuse to breathe, and pretending everything is fine only serves those who benefit from the lie." The room held its breath. "I accept this award," I said, "but not as a symbol of redemption, because I don't believe in performative forgiveness. I believe in accountability, in change." I stepped back from the mic, placed the trophy on the podium, and walked off stage. The applause started slowly, then rose. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. And Lorraine? She didn't follow. She didn't say a word, because there was nothing left to say. Later, outside, Daniel met me at the car. "I saw the whole thing," he said. "Do you think I went too far?" "No," he said. "I think you finally went far enough." He opened the car door. I paused, looked back at the building one last time. Inside was a woman still trying to rebuild an image, while I had rebuilt a life. And the difference? Mine was real. Victory doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence. A silence where judgment once lived. A silence where you finally breathe again, freely, fully, without needing to shrink. After the gala, things didn't explode. They faded. Lorraine didn't call. She didn't apologize again. There were no more passive-aggressive gifts, no surprise visits, no dinners with hidden agendas. She simply disappeared from our lives. Not because I forced her out, but because when the truth finally stood up and took its place, she had nowhere left to hide. I thought, for a while, that I would feel vindicated, triumphant, that exposing the truth, finally revealing who I was, would satisfy some deep ache inside me. But that ache didn't need satisfaction. It needed peace. And that came slowly, in quiet ways. It came when I walked through the grocery store and people stopped whispering, not because they had nothing to say, but because they had said enough. It came when Amanda sent me a letter, a real one, apologizing for playing along, for letting herself be used. She had quit her boutique and started working for a nonprofit helping single mothers get back on their feet. I believed her. Sometimes people change. Sometimes they just need to see what grace under pressure looks like. It came when Daniel, standing in the kitchen one Sunday morning, turned to me with coffee in hand and said, "I want to take your last name." I froze. "You don't have to," I said, stunned. "I want to," he replied. "Not because of the money or the legacy, but because you've taught me what strength looks like, what humility looks like, what love looks like when it doesn't need to prove itself to anyone." So now, we're both Lima. Just two people, no empire, no pretense, building something of our own. We married in a small garden surrounded by the people who saw us from the beginning. The teachers I worked with, the women I mentored, the kids we tutored together. No press, no pageantry, no Lorraine. She wasn't invited. And for the first time, Daniel didn't question it. He understood. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means release. We bought land on the edge of town. Built a home with wide windows, wooden floors, and a garden full of wild lavender. I still work with education initiatives, but now I run a national fund, in my real name, that empowers local women-led projects across the country. No more hiding. No more folding myself into a smaller version to be tolerated by someone else's comfort. People still ask me if I ever confronted Lorraine again, if I ever got that final conversation. That perfect cinematic ending where she breaks down in tears and begs for a second chance. But life isn't a movie, and not every villain is bold enough to beg. Some just vanish because the light was too much. I did see her once, months later, in a bookstore downtown. She looked older, diminished, alone, Our eyes met. She nodded. I nodded back. And we both kept walking. That was all I needed. That moment, quiet, still, was victory. Because there's a difference between being feared and being respected. There's a difference between control and character. And when you finally stop performing for approval, you start living in truth. Now, when people tell my story, they call it a lesson. A lesson in class, in humility, in quiet strength. But I don't think of it as a lesson at all. To me, it was a choice. The choice to wait, to observe, to let the world show its cards before I revealed mine. The choice to stay gentle, even when I was being broken. The choice to rise without stepping on anyone. The choice to walk away from noise and return with truth. And most of all, the choice to love a man not because he completed me, but because he stood beside me. Even when the ground shifted. We still get letters. From strangers. From women who say, "I saw myself in you." From girls who write, "You taught me that I don't need to prove anything to be enough." From men who whisper, "I wish my mother had met someone like you." And every time I read those words, I remember the girl I used to be. The girl who walked into a mansion and was looked at like a shadow. The girl who stood in silence while someone else wrote her story for her. The girl who waited, patiently, for the moment the truth would rise. She didn't need revenge. She just needed to be seen. And now, finally, she is.